Good evening, everyone. We are now in Daniel chapter 8. And Daniel chapter 8 has a number of very interesting features. And I would like to address a number of them first. The first one is that the text that we are reading now in Daniel chapter 8, as is recorded here, is now in the Hebrew language. It is no longer in the Aramaic. The Aramaic language started in Daniel chapter 2, verse 4, at the very beginning of the conversation, all the way to the end of Daniel chapter 7. Now, all of that was presented to us in the third person of Daniel. And so we take cognizance that it was compiled and written down for us to read today by other people who were eyewitness of the time. However, when it came to Daniel chapter 7, things took a turn. So let us go back to Daniel chapter 7. In Daniel chapter 7, it turns from speaking about Daniel in the third person to reflecting on the first year of Belshazzar. Daniel saw a dream, and it's still in the third person. And we are told that he wrote the dream down, and we covered quite in depth when we were dealing with Daniel chapter 7. And then it begins in verse 2 that says, Daniel said, and thereafter we read about the first person. Now, in my opinion, and it's my opinion of things right now, I just want to share with you that even up to Daniel chapter 7, it was compiled by other people. It was written down by Daniel, but it is now expressed in chapter 7 as something that was compiled, but it was really from the text of Daniel. That is why in Daniel chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, describes it in a third person format. And then thereafter, we will read from the conversation here. I was looking at my vision that is appearing in what he wrote. And so I'm of the opinion that this was originally written down by Daniel, but compiled by a third person and compiled in Aramaic. Now, after going through the almost seven chapters of Aramaic, we will find that the Aramaic language is used in its simplest form. It has no uniqueness of the Aramaic, unlike in the Hebrew text where we will find unique grammar. And so we are safe to say that the Aramaic text expressed by the compilation of what Daniel had written is very straightforward and straight to the point. There is nothing mysterious about the grammar. Now, when we come to Daniel chapter 8, Daniel chapter 8 expresses everything in Hebrew. And we come back to the Hebrew expression. And in my opinion now, the change is this. Starting from Daniel chapter 8 and in verse 1, it would have been written firsthand by Daniel, although in chapter 7 was written firsthand by Daniel, but was placed in the chapter by a third-party compilation. And in Daniel chapter 8, verse 1, we begin to see Daniel in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar the king. A vision appeared to me. And then it says here, Daniel, after this, to the one which appeared to me previously. Now, there is a a little bit of difficulty in the translation, but let me begin by expressing and explaining. In Daniel chapter 7, it was the first year of the reign of Belshazzar. Now we're talking about the third year of the reign of Belshazzar. You will be able to compare and contrast that this third year is the last year of the reign, and it would be subsequent to this that we get chapter 5. Chapter 5 is also in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar, and this chapter 8 would be before chapter 5, because right after chapter 5, then you have the Medo-Persian Empire conquering Babylon. At this point in time, in chapter 8, this vision that Daniel is supposing to see has not had Belshazzar lose the kingdom just yet. And so we would place chapter 5 after chapter 8. So this is important. After chapter 8, we will begin to understand why in chapter 5, Daniel knows how to tell the writing on the wall. Because in chapter 8, he is told a lot more information about the near future. And so it happens in the third year of the reign of Belshazzar. And it says here, a vision appeared to me. And this vision, remember, it is in the state of the state of mid awakeness. It is no longer awake, but it's in between awakeness and dream. And so, if we talk about a vision, it is after a person who is no longer awake, but in the process of getting into a state to dream. So it is not a dream, but it is in a vision. So he is still, well, if you like, semi-conscious. I'm just being a bit technical here, but just to help us understand that a vision is not a dream. Whereas in chapter 7, it was a dream. And chapter 7 is important for us to understand it that way. Now, another piece of information we need to understand is this being a vision, not a dream, as in chapter 7, it says that it is subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously. Now, in chapter 7, there were a set of dreams as well as vision. And so we are always told that he had dreams and vision. Now, in chapter 8, it's about a vision, and this is after. Subsequent literally means after. After the one in chapter 7. So, chapter 7 has taken place 2 years thereafter. Chapter 8 takes place. Now, again, you would have noticed that the book of Daniel is not written in a chronological fashion. We're just piecing them together. And so chapter 5 should be placed after chapter 8. And so that is very important. Now we move on to the rest of chapter 8. Now, I want to point out to us, for our purposes this evening, we are not going into the interpretation of the vision just yet. So you need to understand, in this vision of Daniel, we want to first understand the vision, understand what he saw. But what he saw were two aspects: things that he understood, and then things that he did not understand. Why is this important? Well, for our purposes of the way that we are looking at chapter 8, please bear in mind that our interest is on what he saw and what he understood. And what he understood, we will not interpret until we go past chapter 8, verse 14. There are things that he did not understand, and he was trying to figure out what does it mean. And when we get into the explanation of the vision, we will return back to this vision that he saw, because the explanation does not describe again the vision. And then we will come back to the vision, and then we will try to help us understand what does the interpretation of the vision actually mean. As we have seen in chapter 2 of the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, in chapter 7 of the dreams and vision of Daniel, we come to the conclusion that he has no problem understanding that the first vision that he has, the first imagery that he has, the first part of the head of gold that he has seen in the eyes of Nebuchadnezzar is Babylon. And that in itself, he does not need any more explanation. In chapter 7, he had asked about the horn because he didn't understand the fourth beast. Now, in chapter 8, there are things that he saw in the vision that he understood the vision itself. Now, when I say understood the vision, does not necessarily mean that he understood the meaning of the vision, but he understood what he saw, the progression of the vision, because it wasn't given in the form of beasts, as in the dream of chapter 7. But he did not understand the interpretation. And so let us begin by looking at verse 2. In verse 2, it says this: I saw in the vision. Remember, the vision is something that he can see after he is no longer awake, but before he is in a mode of dreaming. And while I was looking, I was in the citadel of Susa. Now, it's important. The citadel of Susa is a good way of explaining, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision. I myself was beside the Ulai Canal. This word would be the Ulai stream, if you want to put it that way, right? The Ulai Canal or the Ulai stream. Now, what exactly does this mean? So remember, he has to be first asleep, right? He is asleep, meaning he's not awake, but he is not in the dream mode yet. So not dreaming. In that period, he began to, well, for lack of a better term, he is going to have his vision. So I would draw a couple of bubbles. So he had his vision. In that vision, he was looking, he was in that vision. And in that vision, he was looking at the citadel. The citadel is a fort. And this was in Susa or Shushan, right? Depending on how you want to read it in a different chapter. In Shusha or Shushan. So this word Susa is also Shushan, and that is in the Hebrew. I don't know why it's translated as Susa. It's likely that would be the Greek name, but Shushan is the Hebrew name. At the same time, we are told that he looked and he was beside a river or a canal. And this is the Ulai Canal. And so that is what verse 2 is actually saying. So the reason why I'm spending this time to explain to you is that he is already asleep. He is not standing there. He is asleep. He is not awake, but he's not dreaming. So this entire episode that we are seeing here is what we call a vision. And he sees himself inside the vision, just like he saw himself in the dream in chapter 7. But in the dream, he saw beasts. Why we call them beasts is because they don't look like anything that is normal. Now, in verse 3 tells us this. And then, so this, as in Hebrew, begins with the sequential verbs. And then I lifted my eyes, and then, it says here, and then I looked. It's still him doing the actions. And behold, meaning after he raised up his eyes, he saw a ram. And this is the vision he is seeing. He saw a ram which had two horns and was standing in front of the canal. And the two horns were long. Now, he says long. The word here is more appropriately tall or high. I think we can say that. Not long, but high or tall. And then it says, but, and one was longer or higher or taller than the other, with the longer, meaning the higher or the taller, coming up, rising up from the head after the first one. And from here on, I would like to use a little bit more of the Chok Talk. Hopefully, with the Chok Talk, we'll be able to visualize this a little bit better. So now he raised his eyes, and beside that canal, the Ulai Canal, and so we draw the Ulai Canal, it was beside it. And so we are going to draw the vision. The vision is a ram. Now, it's important for us to understand that this is a particular animal that he can see. And so we have a ram, and the ram had a particular description, and it's about the horns. The two horns were tall, were high. And so it is not the usual description for a ram. Yes, the ram has horns, but this must be taller than its regular horns. And one was longer or taller than the other, with the taller one coming up after the first one. And so you can imagine that this would look something like this. We have a horn. And the second horn is rising up taller. And with this, we can say that this was the first horn, and this would be the second horn. And that is the description of the ram standing by the canal. The reason why I need us to have this imagery is because this is a vision. If we don't see what Daniel saw in the vision, we will not understand the vision eventually. We read in verse 4. Verse 4 says, there is no and then here. After looking at this, I saw the action of the ram. The ram was trying to butt. Now, the idea of butt, I think this would be the head down and it was trying to gore, just like a bull trying to use the horn to poke into things. And it was poking westward. Now, this word westward is uh, the sea word. Now, in Israel, when you are talking about the sea, it is the west. Then it talks about the north, and then it talks about the Negev, the south. And it says, no other beast. Now, this one is the idea of animals, no other animals. The animals could not stand against him, nor was there anyone to rescue from his power. Now, this word here is not power. This word here is hand. And we can now tell that the beast, this ram and other beasts, they're all symbolic. But he did as he pleased and made himself great. Now, this word great means he made himself to be very strong. That is great, right? Very strong. So, in the imagery, we can see that he would have moved west, north, and then south. It is very important for us to understand when he moved in this fashion in verse 4, you find that he is conquering everything that comes along the way. And so, in general, you would find that yes, the ram represents some nation and it has two horns. The one horn is taller than the first horn, and it went conquering and it became very strong. No nation could stand against him. And then we read in verse 5. Verse 5 says, and then, this is now in Hebrew, and then while I was trying to understand, this word observing is when I was thinking about this, when I was pondering or contemplating, is not seeing anymore. This is seeing, this is not seeing. He is thinking about it. And what is this strange animal? I see it as a ram, but it's going around goring other beasts. And no one can rescue the beast from his hand. What hand? He has hoofs. Right? He is a ram. But it now appears that uh, he, the ram, it's in the third person masculine singular because ram is a male animal. It says, behold, a male goat, a he goat, was coming from the west over the surface of the entire earth without touching the ground, and the he goat had a prominent horn between his eyes. So now we need to understand a few things from this text. This is a he goat. He was coming from the west. West would be this direction over on this side. Now, this he goat is coming from the west. So, this he goat coming from the west, he was all over the entire land, but he doesn't touch the ground. And the goat had a prominent horn between his eyes. Now, this prominent horn, uh, in the Hebrew text, you would find that it it really means that he has a conspicuous horn. He has a horn that is outstanding. You when you look at it, it stands out. It is not normal. That is what this word means. Although it's translated as prominent or conspicuous, we can think of the goat. So we look at a goat, for example, the goat would look like this. The goat, and then he has a horn like a rhinoceros, and he doesn't touch the ground. And so this would be the ground. And he is actually above the ground. And it is important then for us to realize that these are above the ground. So this is the vision that Daniel is seeing. And this goat is looking really strange, but it's a goat that as uh, it is running in a way that it doesn't touch the ground. Something like a magnetic levitation, right? It's like those trains that has magnets that doesn't touch the ground. So it conveys the idea that he is so fast. And that is what it means. He is so fast. Now we read in verse 6. He came up to the ram. Now in verse 6, we are missing the usual words. And then, as Daniel looked at this goat, looking at him running and doesn't touch the ground, he looks so strange with a horn between his eyes. He came up to the ram that had the two horns, which I had seen standing in front of the Ulai Canal. And then, that's the words that is missing. And then he ran at him in his mighty wrath. Now, it is quite interesting. You find that as he came, he was like a rhino, and this horn actually rushed at him and, well, I guess you can say, hooked him, right? And the this would be the goat, and the goat would poke at him with that horn because he would rush at the ram who had already conquered, and it's standing there, and he rushed at him in his mighty wrath. Now, this is a bit challenging in translation. Literally, it means the heat of strength. That's literal. So you can think of it with the fury of his power. Uh, the goat is actually rushing at the ram at full speed, with all his might rushing forth. That would be the imagination. Now, this goat that I have put up here, it's not from the north. I'm just using the space up there. But he's coming from the west, and he's going to ram into the ram. Verse 7. And then, this is after the rushing, as he was rushing with all his might, I saw him, the he goat, come up to the side. Right? Beside is the side of the ram. And then, verse 7, it says, it enraged at him. Now, this word, it enraged at him, literally means he came down and fought with it. So this word is enraged, literally means to fight. Mara is to be embittered. And so it literally means to fight him. And then, so all of these are the missing words. And then he struck the ram. And then, after striking the ram, smashed his two horns and break it into pieces. And the ram had no strength to stand him, meaning he can't stand in his way. This word so is, and then the he goat, hurled him, the ram, to the ground. And then you can see all this happening in a consecutive, in a sequential order. Threw him to the ground and then trampled him. And there was no one to rescue the ram from his hand, the hand of the he goat. Now, with this, we now look at verse 8. Verse 8 says this, and then, right? And as he became very big and powerful, the large horn was broken. So when he became big, the horn broke. And this would be, and then. The reason why I have to emphasize is that it only happens after the big horn broke. And then it says here, in its place, 4 prominent horns came up toward the 4 winds of heavens. Now we have 4 horns. Now this idea is quite important for us to understand. And now in verse 8, the picture that we now have looks something like this. This particular animal now not only have the big horn broken, he's got some strange horns that comes out from between his eyes, and they are 4 horns. And this last verse that we can cover today is in verse 9. And verse 9 says this, and out of one of them came a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly toward the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful. Now, this word beautiful should be read as beautiful, the beautiful place. I think that would be a good way of looking at it. A beautiful place. That would be the promised land. And so how does this work? So you see that in one of the horns, and we don't know which one, and I'm going to pick horn number 4. Then we have a horn that comes out. The horn then goes to a few different places. The horn will go to the south, toward the east, and toward the beautiful land, which is also in the south, and that would be Israel. That would be the picture that he has seen. All right. And so with this, we come to the end of our session today.